All right, y'all, back with another paid review. This time we be reviewing an old webtoon. Now, the author of, or I should call him SOULARTS, he's a different guy I reviewed recently, not the hunchback, moronic loser that filed a complaint on me, but someone else. He requested another review of something he did long ago. Reason why is because I said in that review of his, I said, well, bro, I don't know what the story is actually about because the synopsis versus what's actually happening in chapter one kind of contradict each other. There doesn't seem to be a good start of this is what things are, this is what's happening, and this is what the characters want to do. It's just things happening. We have no idea what we're looking forward to, what we're fighting for, who to root for, who's the bad guy, who's the good guy. It was just all over the place, really. It was a mess. So he requested that, okay, can you review my old work then? See if I started the story correctly in this one? Like, does it have a proper beginning? And I'll tell you right now, it honestly does. It has a very, very good beginning. And I will say that this story, Tale of the King, is way better than the new story that he's working on. Way better. But there is one problem. Now, this is the prologue. And the whole prologue reads as a summary of events. And I might as well be reading a light novel. With a few images, because that's what it felt like reading the whole prologue. Initially, I had started reading part one before I read the prologue. Part one actually captured my attention. It actually hooked me because I could see what the main character was frustrated by. I could see and feel what he wanted. He wanted freedom. And we're going to get to part one because we're going to go through the prologue and then we're going to go through part one or chapter one. So in both of these chapters, I actually was hooked. I knew who the bad guy was. I knew who the good guy was. But was I actually rooting for somebody? Well, sort of. It's just I realized that the way SOULARTS created this story, it feels like Games of Thrones. And what I mean by that is that technically, when you read the prologue, the main character is the plot itself. It's the world itself. And that people find themselves in this messed up world, and the world is always shifting and so on and so on. And I was like, oh, this is cool. It's not easy to do. So the hook is definitely the plot over here. So, if we start going through it, I will say that the art, I'm sure you know this, bro. The art is totally jacked. I'm sorry, but hey, it is what you did a long time ago. What you can do now is way better than this. So yeah, we know that. We saw it. It's fine. But artistically wise, yeah, the whole thing is kind of jacked up. But anyway, the main point of this review is to see if the author was able to start the story well, instead of just having random events happening. So it starts off by saying, one day out of the darkness from nowhere, an empty husk found a way to create a flame strong and bright enough to reach the stars. And for eons, the flame lit the way for all those who saw it. See, that's pretty cool. Honestly, that's pretty cool. I like it. I was like, oh, this is interesting. A husk found a flame and lit the way for all who saw it. Interesting. The husk who lit the flame bound itself to it and became a king. So as long as the flame burned, the king would always remain. Pretty interesting, isn't it? I was like, whoa, yeah, this is an interesting concept. But okay. But without subjects, the husk was no true king. So from the ashes that came from the flame, the husk gave his subjects bodies, and from the embers of the flame, he gave them souls. This is really cool. Even the art direction here is cool. But here's another problem. The problem is the entirety of this prologue, if it was in manga format or MANAA format, should have been just 5 pages. You do not have a prologue that is an entire chapter. You don't do that. You don't do that because a prologue is supposed to pretty much summarize the lore, right? Summarize the history, summarize the plot of the story. But this entire prologue is a summary of events, and we have pictures showing us a summary of those events. Instead of those events happening, we see a summary of the events. And when you are making a manga or a comic, things need to be happening. You can't have an entire chapter that serves as a summary of things happening, right? Otherwise, it doesn't feel like you're reading a comic anymore. It feels like you're reading a novel with a few pictures, right? So it got a bit too much as to like, am I actually going to see present day yet? Or is this whole thing just a gigantic summary? It started to feel heavy. So if I were to take this prologue, I could sum it all up in 5 pages. You need to learn how to be able to do that, because as I said, respect the reader's time. You got to respect our time. You can't expect us to actually care about what you've done, what you've created. If you don't hook us on the first page or at least first 5 pages, dude, I'm out. I'm out. Everybody's attention span is not what it is from a decade ago, so you need to keep that in mind. So it continues to say, the king's subjects built him a kingdom, and the kingdom thrived. See, another picture that summarizes the word. But every night the king alone had to defend the flame from the eternal darkness. Right here is when I was like, okay, now this is really cool. I like this. Has to defend the flame from the eternal darkness. What an interesting concept. I can guess where he borrowed such a concept from, and I totally like it. I totally like it. And each night the king grew more and more exhausted fighting the darkness. So one day the king taught his subjects how to use their embers to create their own flames. From then on, the subjects, now called embers, defended their king with their flame and expanded their kingdom further into the darkness. As time passed, the embers, through civilization, progressed, religion was created, explorers of the darkness were established, politics and government were debated over, and defenders protected the kingdom. This is great. This is straight up Games of Thrones level stuff. It's just, yeah, the art, can be improved, and this long-winded summary needs to be much shorter. But otherwise, the whole plot of it is 100% great. It's interesting. I'm hooked. I do like the king. He brought about light in a realm of darkness, and he had to fight to keep the light going, keep the light shining, and so he created his own subjects. I like that. I really do like that. That's really cool. I was hooked right there. But just because I was hooked right there, I'm gonna need a character to carry that exact hook for me. I'm gonna need a character whom I'm going to like to carry it for me, because you get stories like Gachi Akuda, which was one of my favorites. I even spoke about it, remember? And the plot there was a simple revenge story, but the world that the revenge was taking place in was also interesting. A world of literal trash. a city in the sky and a world below, and the main character gets thrown to the world below because he got framed for murder and he wants revenge. That was the plot. And I like the main character because he was depressed and he didn't know what to do living in a world of trash. And so his stepfather told him that, hey, maybe you feel depressed because you aren't doing anything. You have nothing. How about you do something and accumulate things, find things, and fill your space with it so that you can feel better. I like that. That was the plot. But then the plot was lost. In the end, the author decided to go up, down, left, right, and didn't know what the heck she was doing. Or I don't know if it's a woman or what. But ultimately, the author didn't know what they were doing. And I was like, okay, this is not what hooked me. Now we're going on weird adventures and we're fighting weird characters and there's just things happening. What about the revenge? What about the people who framed the main character? Why did they kill his stepfather? What about the city above? You know, all those things that we saw in chapter 1 now disappeared. So in this case, it's like, what are we seeing in the prologue here? Needs to remain. Needs to remain, at least half of it or a huge chunk of it needs to remain as we move forward. Right? Otherwise, you're going to lose the people who were hooked by what they saw in the prologue. And then it says, all reported to the king, but not all loved the king. So in secret, a fifth organization was created, ones that sought darkness to help them extinguish the king's flame. Now, I wish I knew why not all loved the king. Was it one of the embers that betrayed the king? And if so, doesn't the ember realize that they too would just be engulfed by the darkness then? Thus their existence being wiped out? I wonder. This is why you got to make that prologue summary short. Because if you go into too much details like that part over there, not all loved the king, some were working at. Now I have questions. Questions that are not going to be answered. Because this prologue serves as the foundation, but then it's like, well, what about this main question right here? You see, it begins to halt my immersion and halt the level of believability about the story, basically, because it seems like the author is trying to do too much in the very beginning. You see, and readers can pick up on that. While darkness plotted the king's empire grew and soon became larger than the darkness itself. And soon the king himself stood in the front lines to conquer the last of the darkness and bring eternal light to the world. But before the last blow was struck, the darkness used their pawn and killed the king of flame. Each time the king fell, so did his empire, for the darkness fifth organization members were everywhere within the empire. And how's that possible? Because all servants of the king are embers. They have a flame. How can darkness mimic a flame? See what I mean? How? How can the king not realize that some of his subjects are of the darkness? How can he not realize that this organization is wrapped in darkness? The fifth organization is wrapped in darkness. How? You gave us too much to chew on. Now we're asking questions. Now we're getting confused. It was a great start. It should have ended. It should have ended before you even told us about the fifth organization. The summary should have ended there. And then part 1, chapter 1 could have began with somebody from the fifth organization explaining how this thing, how it is that we're able to trick the king or whatever, you know. But instead, you gave us too much to chew on, and now it's like, I don't know. This beef is getting way too hard to chew right now. Really hard to chew. Countless embers were extinguished by the darkness and its minions. Every time the king revived to fight the darkness, he would be overwhelmed, trying to defend everyone within his vast empire. And the more the king died, the weaker the flame became. In desperation to restore the flame to its former glory, even the embers' sacrifice of returning themselves to the flame failed them. In short time, the darkness was able to push the king's empire back to its first kingdom. So in an act of desperation, the king saved one last revival for himself, dispersed his subjects across the world, and gave his flame to a handful of his most trusted, in hopes they will find a way to revive him at full power so they can defeat the darkness. And the final act, the king held in secret. After that, you see, already I'm tired of reading right now. I'm already tired. I'm reading a novel at this point. You know, it's too much, bro. It's really, really too much. Should it just stopped right before the fifth organization was created? Give people something to look forward to. Sure, the idea that the fifth king is giving away the last bit of his embers so he can be revived one day. That's cool too, but you could have done it in chapter 1. The whole idea that most people follow, like the Japanese format of chapter 1 needs to be 50 pages. No, it doesn't. You're not selling to Japanese, are you? You're not in Shonen Jump, so it doesn't have to be 50 pages. It doesn't. Keep it to 15, 20, 30, and you're good to go, right? Stop giving us so much to chew on, because I'm already tired, right? After the king's last words, the descendants of Flame were forced to abandon their king and watch their last home be destroyed. The darkness could not extinguish the flame, so they hid it within the deepest part of their territory to draw out and destroy the last of the king's embers. As time passed, the rule of the king of flame became a fairy tale, and embers who now hide from the darkness have forgotten their history, and very few remember how to use their fire. Still, to this day, the descendants of flame continue to rise and fight the eternal darkness, to save their king and return the world to light. Yeah, so ultimately, it's a great start, and it's a great story. It's just this prologue was too long. Too long. I like the ideas here. After all, I am the one who said, resist the darkness. It's not me. Aren't I the one who made that up, right? We are the crucible against demoralization. We here to destroy the hunchbacks and zombies, resist the darkness that is the filth, woke, trash storytelling of the world. That's resisting the darkness. And this story goes hand in hand with my main message on this channel. So, of course, I'm going to have somewhat of a little bias here. It's like, oh, you're liking it just because it resonates with you. Well, duh. Like, hello, only a hunchback would be like, just because it doesn't resonate with you doesn't mean it's bad. You don't know what you're talking about. For me to spend money on it, it has to resonate with me. Like, what are you talking about? Okay, not even you, hunchback, is going to spend money to go buy a Barbie doll because it doesn't resonate with you. Flipping hunchback. Let's go to part 1 or chapter 1. Now, initially I started reading from here before the prologue, and even here I was hooked, right? So here it opens up with a narrator, this character narrating, saying, what's the count now? 2,000,003. How many times have I died to get up and fight this war again? I could relate to this. In terms of the MANAA ingredients, in terms of familiarity, it is familiar to me because I know the ideas that the author borrows from, some Christian ideas. Relatability, definitely so. So this one actually has way more on the MANAA ingredients than the other story. It has familiarity. It has relatability. Does it have hope? So far, it seems to have a promise of hope. So I would say it does. Is it inspiring? Well, we don't know how it ends. We don't know how much more the characters have to overcome. But it automatically gets 3 out of 4 for the MANAA ingredients. I'm not going to bring up the passable techniques and so on because, yeah, as I said, the art's pretty jacked. And even this one has a lot of grayscale, so forget it. And it's using Webtoons format. But ultimately, already, this is 3 out of the 4 ingredients for MANAA. So the authors got it for this one. Chapter 1. Now, because now I understand from the prologue that these creatures are agents of darkness, it makes way more sense now. It's got way more depth to it now. So we see this samurai-looking guy being attacked by these dark wolves. And now there's actual action, right? It's no longer just visual summaries. It's actually things happening in real time. And it's so cool how he narrates while fighting. He says, forget it, it doesn't matter anymore. And I'm guessing this is a flashback of his fellow embers and so on. This, I can't tell what the heck that is. He says, stop it, they're gone. They've been gone for a long time now. As he enters the woods, pursued by more ghouls of darkness. Unlike us, they don't come back. Unlike us, they can finally stop fighting. They are finally free. So while saying all these things, there's action. Dude is walking through the woods, being attacked by ghouls, and straight up slicing them. It's actually pretty cinematic. It's actually pretty cinematic. He did this to me because he knew I hated him. He knew I hated fighting his war. Look at that. That's really cool. Hated watching the embers I cared for die for his selfish desires. He knew I became an explorer, a dark walker, to get away from him and finish the war he started. The war he made us for. Now, in a way, it's only hitting me now that it looks like the character hates the Fire King, the Flame King. Well, I understand this frustration of like, dude, did you just make us so we can fight your stupid war? Like, that's not fair. That part I understand. I really do. But at the same time, I hope the hatred for the Fire King will evaporate eventually because there's nothing you can do about it. So get over it and just finish the mission, you know? So hopefully as the story moves forward, he'll realize that what's the point of hating something you can't deal with, really? Just get over it. He knew every spark in my ember loathed him. He had to have known there was no other reason for him to make me a descendant of flame. My eternal life is his revenge. And he just finished slicing up the woods after killing all the ghouls. And my punishment. And that's the end of chapter 1. So it's pretty good. Way better than the other story. Way better. So for Webtoons, for chapter 1, I'm going to give it a 7 out of 10. The prologue, the information is good, but the visual summary of like, it feels like a novel. That's not a comic anymore, bro. That's not a comic, so that gets a 1 out of 10. As a whole, I'd say this whole thing thus far is a 6, because it does need to be redrawn if you want to redraw it. But ultimately, the main purpose for this review did I start this story well? Do I have a proper beginning? Yes. A very, very solid beginning in this one. We know who's the enemy. We know who is the would-be hero. We know the world we're in. We know what's at stake. We know the desires of the king, and we can guess the desires of this guy, but technically he just wants to be free from the war, so it's not really a guess. Ultimately, it's clear, it's understandable. It's clear, understandable, readable as well, right? And the facial expressions here are way better than the one in the new comic. So I prefer this story, man. If you're gonna redraw anything, I say redraw this one in manga format. Hold back on the grayscale, it's too much. And yeah, make sure that the prologue is like just 5 pages maximum. Okay, 5 pages maximum. Read old school Naruto. No, in Naruto, when there was an explanation of events in the past, you'd have 3 or 2 pages summarizing it, right? Not a whole chapter summarizing things in the past, just 3 to 2 pages. That's what you gotta do. So go read Naruto, go look at how they did summaries of this is what happened in the Ninja Clan, whatever. I'm not talking about a flashback here where that can be like a whole volume even, right? Such as the fourth Hokage fighting the Nine Tails and Naruto's birth and whatnot. I'm not talking about a flashback, I'm talking about a summary. Okay, there'd be a difference. So go look at that, go find it, and learn how to be passable even with what you're summarizing to get to the point of things, or else we're going to get tired. But anyway, that's it for now. If you want a review, it's $40 per chapter. A chapter consists of 15 to 25 pages, even 30 pages. And that's $40. Okay, don't be a hunchback like that idiot who filed a complaint on me and wasted my damn time just because he wanted compliments, he wanted cookies. There are no cookies here. There are no cookies here, and I'm not accepting people who have a very subpar, disgusting drawing level of skill anymore, because it's clear as day that those people are not serious. Don't waste my time, because I ain't here wasting your time. If I am, why are you watching the channel? So that's it for now. Until next time.